This video is going to be about atomic structure. This model of the atom that we use is absolutely key to understanding and explaining all sorts of phenomena in both chemistry and physics. People used to think that atoms were indivisible, it couldn't be broken down into smaller things, but we now know that in fact atoms are made of even smaller particles that we call subatomic particles. You see the ones around the outside there, and two different sorts in the centre. We'll cover the names of these particles and their properties in this video. Okay, so let's have a closer look at this particular atom, which in fact is a lithium atom, and I'll explain how we can tell that from the picture a little bit later on. But you can see, if we look closer, that firstly in the centre there's like a clump of particles, and this clump of particles in the centre is called a nucleus, and it's made up of protons. In this picture, those are the red particles, and neutrons, the green ones. Orbiting around that nucleus, we have a third type of subatomic particle, and these are called electrons. So, there are some really useful things to know about these three types of subatomic particle. In particular, it's useful to know their masses and the charges that they carry. So protons, in this picture the red ones in the centre, protons have a mass of 1 and they have a positive charge. Well, they carry a positive charge. The neutrons, also in the nucleus, also have a mass of 1, and as their name suggests, they have no charge at all, they are neutral. And then the electrons that are orbiting around the outside, in fact their mass is so tiny that it's negligible. That means we can ignore it. So we tend to say that an electron has a mass of 0, but they do carry a charge, and that is a negative charge that balances the positive charge of the proton. So if we look at this lithium atom here, we can see that there are 3 positively charged protons in the nucleus, and there are 3 negatively charged electrons orbiting that nucleus, so the overall charge of a lithium atom, in fact the overall charge of any atom, is 0, because the positive protons and the negative electrons balance each other out. So, if you look up lithium in the periodic table, you'll notice a few things. Firstly, you'll notice that the word lithium is not written out in full, but in fact we use the symbol for lithium, which is a capital L and a lowercase I. You'll also see that there are a couple of numbers associated with lithium, 3 and 7. And once you understand what these numbers mean, they tell you a fantastic amount of information about the structure of a lithium atom. So, firstly, the smaller of the two numbers. This is called the atomic number. Or it can be called the proton number. And this tells us, perhaps unsurprisingly, how many protons there are in the nucleus of a lithium atom. And as we know from the previous pictures, there are 3. The larger of the two numbers is called the mass number. And again, perhaps obviously, that tells us the mass of a lithium atom. So the information we can get from these, well, as I said, the number 3 tells us how many protons there are in a lithium atom. But not only that, we know, like I said previously, that atoms have no overall charge. So if there are 3 protons in the nucleus, there must be 3 electrons orbiting that nucleus. So from the atomic number, we can know how many protons there are in the nucleus, and we can work out how many electrons there are. Then the mass number. Well, we know that electrons' mass is negligible, and we know that the mass of a proton is 1. So if there are 3 of them, 3 out of the 7 must be made up of protons. The remaining 4 in that mass number must be made up of neutrons. So if we can work out the difference between the mass number and the atomic number, that will tell us how many neutrons are in the nucleus. So from just those 2 letters and those 2 numbers, we can work out what element we're talking about. We can work out how many protons it has, how many electrons it has, and how many neutrons it has. So earlier on, I told you that we could tell just from looking at the picture of that lithium atom that it was lithium, and I want to show you how we know. Okay, so we've got a periodic table here. Sometimes people look at the periodic table and think, oh, it's really complicated, but it's not, and I'll show you why it's not now. I mean, it's full of patterns, but the pattern we're going to look at now is this. If you look at a hydrogen atom, it's got an atomic number of 1. There it is at the top. And then we've got helium with an atomic number of 2, lithium 3, beryllium 4, boron 5, carbon 6, 7. They're just in numerical order. They're in numerical order of the atomic number. All the way across the periodic table. That's all people have done. They put them in numerical order. And this is because there is something absolutely fundamentally important about the atomic number. Take lithium as our example, as we have done for the whole video. It has an atomic number of 3. It has got 3 protons. And if you look at an atom and it has got 3 protons, it must be lithium. Forget about the neutrons and the electrons, we're talking about the protons. If you were to look at an atom and it had 6 protons, it would have to be carbon. 8 protons, it would have to be oxygen. So if you've got a carbon atom, and somehow you managed to add a proton to it, you wouldn't have a carbon atom with 7 protons. No, you would have turned it into nitrogen. It's the number of protons that makes an element what it is. And so when we looked at that original, go back and look at it in a minute, when we looked at that original picture of the lithium atom, there were 3 protons in the nucleus. So it must be lithium. It cannot be anything else. Atomic number of 3 is lithium.